Okay, welcome to Tanya Outside In. We are up to chapter 7. Um, Chapter 6, we discussed in relative detail the mechanics of our lower self, of our human element, which sometimes called the nefesh bahamis and sometimes called the nefesh chiyunis, the life-giving soul or the animal soul. Generally, although we generally like colloquially refer to it as the animal soul, I never made a cheshbon, but from my feeling is that the Tanya refers to it more as the life-giving soul than the animal soul, which is an important thing to remember because it's animalistic, not like an animal, as in it's not an animal does not have a nefesh bahamis. A nefesh, although it's called a behema, it still belongs to a human, but it's selfish. Like an animal is selfish and doesn't have the ability to see outside of itself. But remember, it can be trained and it can be elevated, and that's our role here basically. So Perik Vav, we were discussing the mechanics of it. Um, and then we discussed what it means Sitra Achra, which is where it derives its energy from, and what is Kedusha. Um, and then at the end of the chapter, he introduced the a a breakdown of Klipa. Okay, Klipa Sitra Achra synonymous terms, and one refers to the fact that there's a cover up, that's Klipa, and Sitra Achra refers to the fact that it doesn't have any positive definition unto itself. It's just a lack, so to speak, of divinity of the Ribono Shel Olam. Now we discussed at the end of Perik 6 that there is that there the this Klippa breaks down into two styles of Klippa. Okay, the lower style is called the Gimel Klippa Satameus. Now, the Gimel Klippa Satameus, we're not going to speak about them. We're not going to be speaking about them on a level of 3. It's just called Klippas Timaeus. It's just called the Gimel Klippas Timaeus. And that is the completely impure Klippa, which means, I mean, everything needs a spark of Kedusha to exist, otherwise it wouldn't exist. But that spark is so covered over that for all intents and purposes, it isn't there, or better to say, it's not available to the Jew, meaning we don't have access to elevate the Gimel Klipos Timaeus. Anything that derives its energy from the Gimel Klipos Timaeus is forbidden to the Jew. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes from, I mean, everything in the world is either receiving its energy from Kedusha or from Klippa. If it's receiving its energy from Klippa, it's either receiving its energy from Klippas Noiga or Klippas Timaeus. Okay, so everything that is a mitzvah is receiving its life force from Kedusha. Okay, anything that is permissible, not a mitzvah, but not an Avera, that's receiving its life force from Klippas Noiga. And anything that is forbidden, that's receiving its life force from Klippas Timaeus. Now, obviously, we know that we have the 4 levels of existence. We have doimem, somer, chai, medaber, yeah, inanimate, vegetable, animative, or animal, and then human. Okay. Now, those are four. I think they're called kingdoms in our terminology, and they each any being from any of those kingdoms we can understand comes from or derives its energy from either Kedusha, Klippas Timaeus, or Klippas Noiga. But what he ends up with, which is a very, very important idea, which we touched on last time, the very end of chapter 6, is he talks about the idea of our behavior, which is thought, speech, and action, also deriving from Klippas Timaeus. There's such a thing as behavior that derives its energy from Klippas Timaeus. So what does that mean? We have to. It's a bit of a it's conceptual. It's not so difficult, but we always have to look at behavior as as a thing. Whenever you do something, yeah, it begins, it has a middle, and it ends. Yeah, that's the definition. If you're taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners, yeah, you pick it up, you drive it to the dry cleaners, you let him wash it, you take it back from the dry cleaners, pay for it, bring it back to me, give it to me, finished. Okay, that is looked upon as a unit. Yeah, that is looked upon as a unit. Excuse me. That is looked upon as a unit, and that creates a being. Now, as such, just like this mouse, you can understand derives its energy from somewhere. Sorry, yeah. So too, that behavior, that action of having taken my dry cleaners to the dry cleaning has is a thing, and as such, it receives its energy from somewhere. Now, if you were taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners and you were having in mind the mitzvah of V'ahavta kamoicha, and you weren't doing it for any selfish purpose, you were doing it solely for my benefit, yeah, and then that action is a mitzvah and it's deriving its energy from kedusha. Okay, if you are taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners because number one, you're going anyway, and number two, you wanna you really want me to lend you my motorcycle, yeah, and then you know that if you do me a favor, next week when you ask me for my motorcycle, you're gonna get, I don't know why I said motorcycle, but you're gonna get me, you'll there's more chance you'll get my motorcycle from me. Was that motivated in any way did that reveal God in the world? There was absolutely no revelation of God in the world from that. Did you conceal God in the world? Well, a little bit. You didn't go again. This is a very important point. You didn't ultimately conceal God, meaning God has a ratzon. Yeah. There's things that he likes and things that he doesn't like. And there are things that he, so to speak, doesn't have an opinion on. Okay. Now, that's not absolutely true, but to understand the idea, it's helpful. Okay, so we've got things that are mitzvah, he likes them. We've got things that are nevera, he doesn't like them. And then we've got things that are reshus, permissible, he doesn't have an opinion. Okay, now when you take my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners for the mitzvah v'haftarecha kamoicha, now you've just revealed God in the world. His ratzon has been revealed. If you take my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners for your own selfish purposes, there's nothing wrong with taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Hashem doesn't mind that. So you're not revealing Hashem, and you're concealing Hashem to a level. Whereas if Hashem didn't like you taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners, if there was an Avera connected to taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners, then you're ultimately concealing him. So that's why things that are permissible are still from Klippa, because there is a cover up. You're not revealing Ratzon Hashem in the world, but you're not ultimately concealing it. Whereas if I'm actually doing something that's forbidden, then not only am I not revealing him, not only am I semi-concealing him, but I'm ultimately concealing him. Because I'm saying that my Ratzon is more real than God's Ratzon. Whereas when it's permissible, I'm saying that there's my Ratzon and maybe there's also God's Ratzon. And when there's no conflict, I'll go with my Ratzon. So it's not an ultimate cover up. Whereas when I'm doing an Avera, it's an ultimate cover up. So when I've got sorry, when I've got when I've got when I've got a wait for our cleaners. When I've got when there's a behavior that is forbidden, that behavior is deriving its energy from the Klippas of Timaeus, from an absolute cover-up. When I'm doing something that's permissible, it's not an ultimate cover-up, but it's still a cover-up. So now we've got thought, speech, and action. Okay. Any action, you understand, it begins and it ends and it has a middle. That's a thing and a thing unto itself, and that receives its energy from somewhere. Same with speech, and also the same with thought as well. Okay, now the Rebbe begins Perek Zion, talking now about Klippas Noiga. The last chapter we were talking about Klippas, and now we're going to be talking about Klippas Noiga. Okay. Second, just give me a little while this guy finishes this. סליחה, אני מפריע פה? זה מפריע? So, okay, okay. So, פרק ז' אך נפש החיונס הבהמיש בישראל. The nefesh hachiyunis Bahamis, the life-giving soul, our lower soul that exists within a Jew. Shemitzata klipa, that comes from the klipa, is not holy, it's natural, it's a creation. Hamanubeshas bedam ha'adam, that is enclosed within the blood of man, like we said, is like battery acid. Like battery acid contains the electricity. So is electricity physical? Not really, but it lives in the juice of a battery. So it's kind of physical, but anyway. Genau. The nefasha is a Bahamis, v'chayas, v'oifas, v'dagim tohirim. Not only the Jewish animal soul, but also the soul of all animals and all domesticated animals and all wild animals, all birds and all fish that are tahor and muta ba'achila, that are pure and permissible to eat. But kiyum v'chiyas kol hadoimem, and also the life force and the existence of all inanimate, of all of the inanimate world, the mineral world, because and all of the vegetable world that is permissible to eat, which means not kila, kerem, orla, etc. Now we're getting back to the idea what we're speaking about before. Also, all of the existence and the life force of all of the behavior, thought, speech, action, speech, and thought of this world, the things of this world, that don't have any connection to something forbidden, not any kind of connection to any of the 365 negative prohibitions, or their offshoots, whether they are Torah prohibitions or Durabanan, rabbinic, but they are not l'shem shemaim, like we explained about taking my dry cleaning to the dry cleaners, where you're not being miscovered to v'ahavtarecha kamocha. You have some kind of natural agenda, okay? She'ein l'shem shemaim elo ratzon haguf v'cheftso v'tavasoi. That really it's the ratzon of the goof. It's for the he's going to say v'afilu hu tzorech haguf. Even if it's not for pleasure, it's for the well-being of the goof. You're not doing it for the actual pleasure of it. You're doing it just to continue to be, like going to exercise. Nothing wrong with that. You have a kiyum of chiyusa mamush. It's just to keep the goof going. But the kavana is not l'shem shemayim. You're not doing it with a heavenly purpose. You're not doing it for the Rabbanu Shloim. You're just eating breakfast on a Thursday morning. Why are you eating breakfast on a Thursday morning? I need energy to get on my day. That's it. I'm not thinking about God. That's it. Now, if that's the case, if that's the case, if that's the case, this behavior is not preferable in any way to thought. This thought speech actually is not preferable to the nefesh bahamis achiyunis itself. To the nefesh achiyunis bahamis itself. It's not. It's klipa. We've said the nefesh bahamis. Yeah, is the nefesh bahamis evil? It depends on your definition of evil. By the Tanya definition of evil, yes, it is evil, but that's not how we define evil. It's not malevolent. It's not sadistic. It's not. It's just selfish. That's the Tanya definition of evil. It's just selfish. Yeah, like we meet very nice people who are selfish people. So it doesn't mean evil as in this, like, sadistic kind of, whatever. It's talking about selfish. So that's klipa. It's not about hurting others. It's just about itself. And this thought, speech, and action is not about hurting anyone else. It's just about yourself. And in fact, if it was going to hurt somebody else, you wouldn't do it. You're not a bad person. That means that that thought, speech, and action is of the same level as the soul itself. So remember, we've got the concept of a mitzvah, we've got the concept of the permissible, and we've got the concept of the forbidden. When I'm doing a mitzvah, Hashem is more real than me. When I'm doing an Aveira, I am more real than Hashem. When I'm doing something that's permissible, me and Hashem are both real. I mean, if it was forbidden, I wouldn't do it. But I'm doing it for me, so I'm obviously real. So that's the middle ground. So is it Kedusha? No, it's not Kadosh. Is it Klippa? Yes, it is Klippa. But what kind of Klippa? It's the intermediate Klippa, Klippa's Noiga. Everyone's with me? We're making this very like black and white, that obviously in application things are not like this, but we need to, it makes it much easier to paint the picture in black and white, and then you can fill in the gray areas with your own mind. But this is obviously everything is a combination of different kavanas and much more complex. But the point is that the Nefesh Bahamis is not raised up by this behavior, because this behavior is not revealing the Rebbeinu Hashem. It's not revealing what's in Hashem. Now, let me ask you a question. Why do you think it is that the Jew, the Nefesh Bahamis of the Jew, comes from Klippas Noiga, and the Nefesh Bahamis of the Umos Oilam come from Klippas Atameus? Why is it? Why is that essential in the plan? This is a very, very important question. Why is the Jewish animal soul, why is it necessary that it comes from the Klippas Noiga, whereas the animal soul from the human comes from the Klippas Atameus? And the answer is very revealing. It's Moedik. See, we're lifting up. We're here to lift up the world. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that we're here to lift up the world. Everyone knows that we're here to lift up the world. Now, when we do mitzvahs, we're going to talk about this in a minute. When we do mitzvahs, we raise up the physical world. When you shake a lulav and esrog on Sukkot, you lift up all of the vegetable world. When you offer a korban in the Beis Hamikdash, or you eat meat on Shabbos, you lift up the animal world, etc. Yeah. One thing that's always being elevated with every single mitzvah you do is your animal soul. By definition, you can't do a mitzvah without your animal soul, without your animative. I think that's the most important part of animal. In the English, it's very nice because it's animative, more than calling it an actual behemoth, although we do call it that. But it's animative. It's the thing that it's, like we said, it lives in the blood, and therefore it's able to actually move the body. Whereas the godly soul is too removed. It's too ethereal. It's too refined. It can't do that. So it needs to use the animal soul to move the body. So whenever we do a mitzvah, by definition, you are engaging the animal soul. The animal soul is being drafted into the mitzvah. Therefore, in every mitzvah we do, we are raising up the animal soul. Therefore, it has to be of Klippas Noiga. Because if it was of Klippas Tameus, it couldn't be raised up. That's the definition of Klippas Tameus. So it's like the difference between a kosher piece of meat and a treif piece of meat. For all intents and purposes, to our eyes and to our mouth and to our nose, there is zero difference. It looks the same, it tastes the same, it smells the same, but we know that one can be elevated and one can't be elevated. The kedusha in the kosher piece of meat can go back to Hashem when we use that energy to serve Him, to do mitzvahs, or when we use the pleasure in it to like open our mind to learn Torah, or we eat it on Yom Tov, etc. Shabbos. Then that that kosher meat, the kedusha in it can go up. The treif meat, it can't go up. In fact, we get dragged down by it. And that's exactly the same thing by the actual the animative soul of the Jew. When we're engaged in mitzvahs, the animal soul of the Jew gets schlepped up. When a non-Jew is involved in a mitzvah activity, it doesn't get lifted up in the same way because it's not available in that sense. It's not available in that sense. Just like the non-kosher piece of meat is not available to be elevated, so too the nefesh bahamis from the klipas tameus is not available to be elevated. So that's the reason why it's essential that the Jew has a animative soul from the klipas noiga, and you can really say Elibet the emes that's our ikka avoid in this world is the lifting up of the animal soul. Okay, and we're going to see that in a moment. Okay, so so this behavior that is not forbidden, but it's also not a mitzvah, is not in any way preferable to the actual soul itself. Because this behavior is receiving its energy from this second madrega of klipa, this higher level of klipa, which is the klipa, which is called klipa, the klipa reveres, the fourth klipa, which is called colloquially, and technically, I suppose as well, klipa's noiga. Noiga means that it shines. Yeah, meaning that the actual klipa, the klipa is the husk, the shell, yeah, of a piece of, like a nut or a fruit. So when it says klipa's noiga, it means that it's a more refined klipa conceptually, so it allows the light, not that it has a light of its own. It doesn't have its own. I'm not 100% sure on this actually, but I'll just tell you that the basic understanding the basic understanding that I have, but I'm not absolutely sure, is that the Klipas Noiga doesn't actually have its own shine. It's just that it's thin enough, so to speak, that the shine of the kedusha of the actual thing can go through it. So that's why it's called Klipas Noiga. There could be an idea that it actually does have some sense of iridescent, some sense of illumination of its own. But that's not the Pasha Pshat. The Pasha Pshat is that it's a refined klipa that allows the shine of the actual thing to come through. That's why it's called Klipas Noiga, which means shining. Like this world is cool. This world is a word of klipa meaning that it's basically ra, meaning it's basically selfish, meaning it basically alludes to itself and not to its creator. Except that it has a little bit of toiv mixed in with it, which is what allows us to elevate it. So there could actually have been, and it says in brackets, and from that little bit of good that is in it comes the good attributes, the selflessness, so to speak, of the human aspect of Yisrael. So this world is called a world of Klipa and Sidrak. This world is a world of Klipa's Noiga. Now, Rav Manis has said this, I've heard him say this a bunch of times. Hashem could have gone one step further in creation. The Tzimtzum went to a certain level, but technically Hashem could have taken it to another level. The level it could have gone to would have been where this world was Kulu Klipas Tameus. But there wouldn't have been a point in that. In a world where God couldn't be known, basically Hashem was Metzamtzem himself to such a level where he created a world where it's just able to know God. Any further, if he had gone any further in the Tzimtzum, the world would have become such a situation where it would have been impossible to know God. And there would have been any point to that world, so he didn't make that world. So the world is called Kukuloi Ra. Rubai kukukulora. It's almost exclusively selfish, but there's a weeny little bit of good in it. It could have been kulura, but that wouldn't have been fair. So Hashem didn't do that because there would have been no point to that world. That tells us what the point of the world is. I love that. I love that idea. Okay, the Hebrew opinions said that. The Hebrew opinions mamutzas. Now this is a very important point, and we'll probably take this idea to the end of the year. What is klipas noiga? Vehi b'chinas mamutza is bein shloish klipas tameas legamrei ubein b'chinas umedregas hakadusha. This fourth klipa is the go-between between kedusha and the klipas tameas. It's the bridge. It's not kadosh, but it's not completely ra, which means it's the connection between them. We'll explain what that means, B'ezrat Hashem. And therefore, sometimes it becomes absorbed into the three klipas tameas. And sometimes it goes up, the tov that's in it goes up into the level of kedusha, dahaina. What does that mean? When the good that is mixed in it, again, that could be understood in a more technical term as the good that's mixed into the klipa, but the pasha idea is the good that's within the organism, say, or the behavior, that is concealed by the klipa. Nisbare is selected, me'ara, is chosen from the selfishness. And it is, so to speak, strengthened. It goes up above the kedusha. Okay, and then he's going to explain what that means. But he's going to give some examples. But I want to give a beautiful mashal here that I heard from the Hornsteipler Rebbe that I've added to over the years, but it's extremely helpful to understand the relationship. I've probably mentioned it to you before, but we'll say it again. It's the mashal of a stream. Okay, there's this beautiful crystal clear stream that's running down the mountain. Okay. I don't know the last time you're in the mountains, yeah, but you know these streams in the mountain. If you have a water bottle with you and you fill it up with that water, it's like you just never want it to end. You know what I mean? So it's perfectly clear. That's called kedusha. Okay, and it's running down the mountain. Now, what happens is someone comes along, and it's really in the mashal. It has to be a yid. Yeah, a Ish Yisrael comes along with some kind of implement, and he starts to scratch out a channel from the path, he starts to scratch out a path, a channel from this pristine river. Now, what happens is the water from the river now is siphoned off and it starts to collect and it becomes a swamp. It becomes a stagnant swamp. It stinks and it attracts mosquitoes and crocodiles. It becomes filthy and muddy and disgusting. Okay? That is the mashal, that the kedusha is the energy coming down the mountain, yeah, the pristine clear water. The klipas noiga is the channel that the Jew scratches out, and that energy is siphoned off, and it collects as a swamp. It becomes a swamp. Let me ask you a question. What makes the swamp disgusting? What's the actual, so to speak, the tool or the mechanic? What's the chomer, the material? That's not the right word. That makes the swamp disgusting. What, Gabriel?
The water.
What?
The water.
The water. It's an amazing idea that what's a swamp, a dried up swamp called? It's called a meadow. A dried up swamp is a meadow. The disgustingness of the swamp is the water. You hear them how fantastic this moshel is? The Kedusha itself caught in the grassland is what makes the grassland into a swamp, makes it disgusting. If you take the water out of that grassland, it just becomes a meadow, which is wonderful. So it's the Kedusha trapped in the Klippa that makes the Klippa repulsive. The Klippa by itself is actually wonderful. It's just the grassland. There's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, it's very beautiful. We can enjoy it. But when the water gets caught in the Klippa, the Kedusha gets caught in the Klippa. Now the Klippa becomes repugnant and disgusting. It's an amazing idea. So now this is really special. What's the difference? We're going off Tanya a little bit here, but we're not. This is Tanya, just not at this place here. What's the difference conceptually or ideologically or philosophically? What's the difference between the river and the swamp? What's the philosophical difference between a river and a swamp, the way it works?
One is stagnant.
Yeah.
Sorry? So
a river is always moving and a swamp is stagnant.
Yeah. So exactly. But listen to how you can explain this by saying like this. Every part of the river is a concept of receiving and giving. Receiving and giving. Mashpia makabel. Every millimeter of the river is receiving from above it and passing on to below it. The concept of the river is the concept of mashpia makabel. It's amazing. The concept of a swamp is makabel. It receives. It doesn't pass on. It just receives. That's exactly the inyan of the Klippa. And that's the inyan of the lowest of all creatures is called the Yitush. And he says later on in the Sefer, the Yitush, if it's a mosquito, whatever it is, the thing that defines the lowest creature in all of reality is that it's machnis v'eina moitzi, meaning it doesn't go to the bathroom, meaning it brings in, but it doesn't even give excrement. See, excrement is a level of giving. It's a very, very, very low. It's the lowest level of giving, but it's still a level of giving. The lowest thing in creation, the Yitush, is machnis v'eina moitzi. It brings in and it doesn't give, just like the swamp. Who was the character in history who wanted to be this? His aspiration was to be the ultimate makabel. Come on, Gabriel, no?
Yeah. I mean, Paro, I know.
Paro didn't want people. He didn't want to have people know that he went to the bathroom. That was the whole inyan of not going to the bathroom.
The ultimate mashpia, not the ultimate makabel.
No, that was the point. The ultimate makabel. He was trying to say to people that I don't even go to the bathroom. I'm the tachlis Klippa mamash. I'm the God. I'm God. I'm the opposite of God mamash. That's the difference between a holy king and a treifa king. A holy king is just holy anyone is just thinking, how can I help? How can I be of service to you? What can I do for you? And the unholy person is just thinking, what can I get from you? How can I receive from you? How can you make my life better? So Moshe was there. Anachnu ma. He's like what was his whole thing? That he ran off and saved the sheep. That was the gilui of how gavaldic he was. That he was just like, how can I help you? That was all he was thinking about. And Paro was the exact opposite. How can you help me? And he thought that was the minor. That was the ultimate level. I'm the swamp mamash, said Paro. Now this moshel is very important because our work is in that channel. The work of the Jew is in the channel. The work of the Jew is taking the things of this world and elevating them to the Ribbono Shel Olam. If we take the things from this world for our own selfish purposes, that's becoming the swamp. And that brings down the entire world. So why did I say it's the Yisrael who's that middle path? And you can bring from the Nefesh HaChaim to explain this. The Nefesh HaChaim says that a Yisrael who has one bad thought causes more damage than Titus Rasha, who took a zoina in the Kodesh Kedoshim and laid out a Sefer Torah and had znus with her in the Kodesh Kedoshim. The Yid who entertains, not who has a bad thought, sorry, who entertains a bad thought, who clicks on the wrong link on his computer and sits there and looks at that, is causing more damage than Titus Rasha, who took a zoina, like we just said. What's pshat? Because the Jew is connected to Klipas Noga, meaning he has access to the stream of Kedusha. Whereas the Umas Olam, who are connected to Klipas Temes, they don't have access to that Kedusha. So he doesn't channel any Kedusha into the swamp. So what he did was terrible, but he didn't destroy reality. In the same way as a Jew who just does something slightly not Beseda, because he's connected to Kedusha, he then causes the energy of Kedusha, the perfection of Hashem's perfect energy, the perfect water of the stream, he siphons it out of the stream and it collects in the swamp. And it becomes disgusting and rank and fetid. So that's why in the Moshel, the person who is Hoikek, who scratches out that channel, has to be an Ish Yisrael. The Umas Olim aren't able to do that. So the stakes are high. The stakes are high. We'll see next week, B'ezrat Hashem, that the different ways of elevating the world and the different things that we're here to elevate. But so that's the idea, is that Kedusha reveals the Ribbono Shel Olam in the world, and that's called Ratzon Hashem, which is also known as Torah Mitzvahs. The Klipas Temeis conceal the Ribbono Shel Olam in the world. Ultimately, that's Averas. That's things that are forbidden. Okay, that means that I exist to the exclusion of God. Then there's the permissible, the realm of the permissible, where I wouldn't eat that if it wasn't kosher, but I'm not eating it for God. Yeah, doesn't have any there's no mitzvah to eat all the kosher food in the world. So there's just, when you eat food, it has to be kosher. Now, is your life dedicated to Ribbono Shel Olam? If so, that kosher food is elevated. And if a person's life isn't dedicated to Ribbono Shel Olam, that food is not elevated. Okay, and we'll see how it's if he's just doing it as a means to an end, meaning if he's eating the food for pleasure, that's an end unto itself. And we're going to say next week, B'ezrat Hashem, that brings the energy down. Whereas if he's not doing it as a means to an end, he's just doing it for the energy. So he's doing it as a means to an end. He's not doing it as an end unto itself. He's just doing it for the energy. Like you're not eating breakfast on a Thursday morning as an end unto itself. You're just doing it for the energy. Now the question is, what are you going to use that energy for? So you'd be like, well, I was going to go to the gym, but maybe I'll go and I'll take that food to the old lady as the mitzvah of V'ahavta L'orecha Kamocha instead. So now that energy was available to Kedusha, so that energy didn't go down. Okay, it just stayed where it was. Okay, that's the mechanics of how it works. So we should be Zohar B'ezrat Hashem to lift up this world. Any questions?
Amen.
What's Michael, say it again.
I was just saying amen, and he should have been, and B'shat Tova.
Amen.
We should all be celebrating on Tisha B'av. As a Shem. What's the Klipas Noga in the Moshel before the Yid siphons off the water?
What do you mean? What's it in the? Oh, it doesn't exist as a thing before in the Moshel. The Moshel doesn't account for that. It's just the idea that it's the Medmutza that siphons that siphons the kedusha into the klipas tameus, and if we behave ourselves in the world of klipas noiga, that's basically like stopping off the flow of the water from the stream into the swamp, and then me'elav, the swamp dries up and becomes a meadow.
No, I would think that the Klipas Noga is like a flat land, like a desert, and you have the ability to add water into it and turn it into a meadow, or misuse it and turn it into a swamp.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear that. It will get more complicated to work it out as how we said, but I hear what you're saying.
Is the reason that the Yid comes from Klipas Noga not only because he has to mala his Klipas Noga, but also because now he has a shaykhis to the world?
Say that again.
The fact that a Yid comes from Klipas Noga, you said, is because his job is to be mala his Klipas Noga, his Nefesh HaBahamis.
And yes, primarily.
Is it also what gives us is it also through that we have a shaykhis to the world that actually enables us to lift up the world? If not for that, we wouldn't be able to connect to the world.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't exactly. If Klipa is the world, if there was no Klipa, you wouldn't be of the world.
No. If we weren't made up of Klipas Noga, we wouldn't have the ability to lift up other Klipas Noga.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, I suppose we'll. Yeah, I suppose you could say that. We'll say that next in chapter 8. We'll talk about that. Yeah. Short the shame. Okay.
Shatova.
Amen. We're
First
sharing
time.
good news. Cycles and Chevrolet.